Well, my concerns are the same concerns I've had for other Syrian cities and towns under siege. There are no international monitors. There's no independent press. And the Syrian regime puts out its own version of events, versions that we are not able to reliably check, as you well know.
There seems to be a lack of international support for direct action within Syria. Is that something that the United States would potentially consider, say, as in Libya?
Well, no. If you're asking if the U.S. administration is willing to commit troops to Syria, I think the answer, as of now, is absolutely not. The United States it feels itself, or at least the people feel, that we're overextended with combat operations in Afghanistan, NATO operations in Libya. We just had 5 soldiers killed in Iraq a few days ago. So that war is far from 100% over. And the United States is facing, as is Britain, an economic crisis, and jobs are the issue that the American people want the president to focus on, not foreign adventures.
Now, of course, the international community are trying to get a resolution through. There is no agreement as such. How much concern do you have about the possibility of not getting a UN resolution through? It seems that Russia will veto the watered-down version that is currently under discussion.
Well, I think it will be very disheartening for the people in Syria who are rising up if the Security Council cannot even pass a resolution that doesn't call for sanctions, doesn't call for any military intervention, but merely condemns the Syrian leadership for its treatment of its brutal treatment of its own people. So one would hope that Britain and France and other sponsors would be able to prevail on the Russians to at least abstain on the resolution.
Why do you think the Russians are being so difficult in terms of what the rest of the international community is asking for?
Well, the Russians have rebuilt their relationships with Syria after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, and they're a major arms seller to Syria, and they have a good relationship with this current regime in Syria. Moreover, I think it's not a stretch to say that the Russians and Chinese have their own issues with human rights and lack of fully functioning democracies, and therefore they're hesitant to see intervention in what they regard as the internal affairs of authoritarian states.
Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency are discussing this undeclared nuclear reactor. You, as the former US ambassador to Syria, did you have any inkling about this suggested undeclared nuclear reactor? Did you know of any works on it?
I did not. I can't get into the details, but there might have been, now that I look back, there might have been a hint or two that something of that nature was going on. But where it was going on and, you know, the idea that it was a clandestine nuclear reactor, no, we did not know that. And I think that came as a surprise to a lot of people.
Do you think it was something worth pursuing?
Well, the regime must have thought so, and in fact, I've heard reports that the original plan may have started under the old man himself, Bashar Al Asaad, and the son inherited the plan, but it was a rather brazen act. On the other hand, I would say this, and that is that the Syrian people and the Arabs in general don't believe it's particularly fair either that Israel has a nuclear monopoly and nobody says anything about it.
Now, the US has had a rather difficult relationship with Syria over the years. Under the Obama administration, it's been thawing somewhat, but it seems now, do you think that it can ever get back to any kind of diplomatic discussion, or is that over with this particular regime?
It's over. The Obama administration took some risk to send an ambassador back to Syria In fact, it was a recess appointment. It did not have the advice and consent of the Senate, but it was a legal move. And they did it just, ironically, a few months before all of this chaos and this uprising broke out. And in the eyes of the Obama administration, and indeed in the eyes of many of the Syrian people, this President Bashar Al Asaad has lost his legitimacy, and therefore it's very hard to contemplate the U.S., for instance, asking the Israelis to negotiate a treaty to return all of the Golan to Syria as long as Bashar al-Assad is and his people are in power.